Crystal Empire serves a very interesting case of the massive impacts of equestrian weather manipulation. The Crystal Heart, an artifact powered by the joy of crystal ponies, manages to hold back the cold, ensuring the survival of a civilization, but not without consequence. The Crystal Heart serves as a safeguard for the hundreds of crystal ponies that give it power, but the straits it places on the environment could be dour. But to truly understand the power the Crystal Heart's got, we must first know how the weather acts where it's not. The princesses themselves say that weather this far north has a will of its own, so I believe the use of meteorology, or weather science, is condoned. No weather ponies are ready or able to tip the scales, so a more scientific approach should be less prone to fail. A main component of meteorology is the study of air, and how it acts and moves within the atmosphere. While all air may seem similar, it's definitely not. There are two main types, and the differences are stark. Types of air differ in three main ways: their temperature, density, and amount of moisture contained. Though counterintuitive, air is not dry, for a percentage of it is water, invisible to our eyes. Water vapor, water in its gas phase, takes up space left by air, and from it clouds can be made. Warm air is hot and has a tendency to rise. It's not very dense and holds amounts of moisture that surprise. Cold air is cool and usually falls. As a result, it's far denser and holds little moisture at all. These two types of air tend to keep to themselves, forming large groups called masses, not meeting if it can be helped. But regardless of their preferences, these two masses do meet, forming borders called fronts wherever they greet. These fronts vary in size, shape, and strength. They can also span entire countries with their considerable length. Within them, various weather patterns arise, but the intensity of these, upon the temperature difference, relies. The hotter the warm air, and the cooler the cold, the stronger the front, and the weather more bold. Of these fronts, there are four main types, named after the mass that pushes the air out of sight. Warm fronts are formed where warm air runs into cold. They make weather that is relatively mild, but the span of these fronts mean it lasts for a while. Light showers and storms are what to expect, but despite their width, not much power they project. Cold fronts are formed where cold air ran into warm, and since cold air falls, it crashes into warm air as a steep wall, creating short but violent storms. Thunder, lightning, and heavy rain are the norm. Thankfully, these last for only a short time, but can be quite dangerous for those caught in their grind. On stationary fronts, masses seem to abide. Warm air and cold seem to stand side by side. When cold air and warm push each other with equal force, a stationary front forms as a matter of course. Cloudy weather forms, and some rain and snow, but once the balance shifts, another front starts to go. Precipitation, water falling from the sky, is common along these fronts. When moisture from the warm air, the cold air shunts. The cold air can't hold the vapor, so it goes, condensing into water that is ejected, and from the air it flows. It moves through the air in the form of clouds, and can take various forms along its way to the ground. If the air is near freezing, it can fall as hail, sleet, or snow. But if the air is too warm, only rain is sowed. With or without Pegasi, the cycle appears to be maintained, which is why I believe it should be explained. In the Crystal Empire, weather is untamed. No weather pony could stop its foul reign. Even the princesses, strong as they are, failed in their efforts to properly bar, and so the Crystal Empire would have been consumed by ice, if not for repair of a certain device. The Crystal Heart by itself can hold back the cold, but precisely how it works is something I haven't been told. I only know it's powered by Crystal Pony Joy, but I must speculate on how that power is employed. I believe the Crystal Heart uses its power to maintain a warm air mass, when robust enough so that no cold front may pass. With this mass, the heart holds a stationary front, one that no cold air can conceivably stunt. It generates and holds a small pocket of heat, a place where crystal ponies can safely retreat, at least so long as the heart is intact, but a cry from an alicorn babe can change that. The moment the heart broke, the stationary front collapsed, causing cold air to close in fast. But the type of front formed when the crystal heart broke is likely a type about which I haven't spoke. Occluded fronts form when warm air is pushed high, by two colder masses lower in the sky. This usually occurs when one front overtakes another's rear. The weather produced from these fronts can be severe. Heavy rain, wind, a and thunderstorms are common to see, but these are far from the worst possibility. Occluded fronts have been known to make cold core funnel clouds from which tornadoes take. Once the crystal heart stopped bringing the heat, warm air would rise quickly, leaving cooler air in its seat. Meanwhile, cold air pushes in from the outside, and the weather formed from these masses should be despised. Since the warm air stayed so for years on end, and the cold air has stayed frigid since the empire began, I believe the occluded front was of the appropriate strength to form ice tornadoes that through the city would snake. If not for the princess's buying time, in these twisters the townsfolk could have likely been entwined. Of course, while the princess's resistance was fair, they couldn't stop the drying of the air. At occluded fronts, the air significantly dries. Combined with low temperatures, ice, snow, and hail forms before our eyes. In the case of the Crystal Empire, there was so much ice and snowfall that the townsfolk were cut off, with no escape at all. Beyond repairing the Crystal Heart, the pony's only hope was hunkering down the palace until the storm broke. I choose the palace because it's sufficiently high to ensure the crowd won't get trapped as the snow piles high to the sky. Fortunately, the Crystal Heart was repaired, and the Empire's citizens by the end had little need to be scared. But the survival of the Empire is balanced on a knife. Should the heart stay broken, its end is in sight. Watching the crystal ponies live their lives reminds me of all creatures that live below the waterline. Like a levee to the ocean, the Crystal Heart holds back the cold. I pray it stays protected, so that the Empire may grow old. But to you, this information is likely old hat. Aside from the weather science, its conclusions have sat, laid out for all to see for years. But there is more about the Crystal Heart, to which our thoughts may be steered. First, on other ways such a powerful artifact can be applied. Its vast utility cannot be denied. An artifact, such as the Crystal Heart, give ponies the ability to select their weather a la carte. Pegasi can control the moisture in the air. They can manipulate the clouds and shift the rains from here and there. But in order to do this, great resources are required. Complex machinery, coordination, and large amounts of wind power must be sired. They may move the clouds that bring the snow, but winter is coming, regardless how slow. Temperature appears to be beyond a Pegasi's pale. They can move the waters, but when it comes to heating air, fail. Only with coordination with the celestial powers can temperature be regulated and the seasons flower. The Crystal Heart, by comparison, seems simple to use. To work, joy need only be infused. And while Pegasi control the moisture in the air, and princesses control the movement of celestial spheres, the Crystal Heart directly controls the temp, and with it, the creation of no other pattern is exempt. The ability to control the temperature and moisture of the air mass give ponies near complete control of the weather, and with it, no foe could pass. Generals and strategists have dreamed, and have actually tried, to influence the heavens along the earth upon which they fight. Most took advantage of weather patterns that exist, and there are plenty of examples of this. Cloaking an army in the cover of a storm, waiting for a gale to create a natural ford, carefully deploying sailing ships upwind, and allowing typhoons to destroy enemy fleets out of season. Generals have literally prayed to ensure the weather would be with them on their campaigns, but ponies need not pray, for they would know exactly what the weather would show. Using Pegasi and the Crystal Heart, ponies could precisely control the weather they impart. In the case of the crystal ponies up in the north, the Crystal Heart alone will be a fitting retort. By regularly changing the heart's power and range, a constant blizzard around the Empire could be amplified and maintained. The enemy lines would be frigid and pelted with ice, while Imperial troops could languish in weather that was nice. Their foe supply and communication lines would be cut or strained, strong blizzard grounding any flyers or planes. Any soldiers fighting the Empire would stay in a frozen hell, only broken by the occasional dry air spells. Of course, these would likely be accompanied by attacks. Crystal Pony's troops would be fresh, but most foes would immediately crash, fleeing back to the lands from which they came, bemoaning another war General Winter has claimed. The only possible force that could sustain such an attack would easily have to be the Yaks. Their bodies have natural resistance to the cold. They live in the mountains and still act extremely bold. But even they have been seen overwhelmed by snow, and current projections suggest their numbers are too low. Should any force decide to invade the Empire, Crystal Points could ensure that it would backfire. So far, most of this has been up and up for opponents. So long as the barrier stays up, it could rarely be owned. But this, like all things, comes at a cost. For the pony's gain is another's loss. For 1,000 years, the Crystal Empire had been erased. No crystal pony could be seen or found in this space. 1,000 years is a lot of time for something else to move in, tundra aside. What appears to be an empty, desolate waste, to others could be a thriving settling place. Assuming no magical creatures had set up shop, there are other, more mundane animals that could have lived in this plot. Reindeer, caribou, moose, bears, lemmings, foxes, wolves, owls, and hares. And this assumed no other species emerged, evolved specifically for the land upon which the Crystal Empire returned. All abruptly pushed to the side once the Crystal Empire reappeared to equestrian eyes. To add further injury to injury, on stationary fronts, where cold air and warm constantly bunt, regular snowfall and blizzards could be expected to form. Harsh weather comes to places where cold and warm air are at war, further accelerating the destruction of habitat, forcing nearby flora and fauna to fall further back. But these problems are only local in scale. There also may be regional and global implications to entail. A permanent mass of warm air sitting up this far north would likely throw a wrench in the work of any climatic conditions found before the Crystal Empire pops up out of the ground. During the 1,000 years without the Crystal Heart, wind would flow easily through these parts. Aside from the buildings, the terrain looks flat. Winds and fronts of air could move without a spat. Such a large obstruction blocking or instantly warming those winds could cause immense changes to the weather within. The possible changes in climate are above my pay grade to find, and data I can't get would need to be defined. But I would be remiss if I skipped the opportunity to reflect on this. The effect created by such a large pocket of warm air sounds similar to how the climate of large cities is impaired. The effect is formally known as the urban heat isle. It describes how urban areas are warmer than more rural domiciles. The cause is slightly different in this case, but I believe the effects are about the same for each place. For most cities, it's caused by the accumulation of heat on surfaces like asphalt, metal, and concrete. The Crystal Empire has only one Crystal Heart to blame, but the effects largely remain the same. Urban heat isles create more storms and rainfall downwind, as the moisture from the warm air washes into colder regions. Should the heart let any moisture or warm air escape, downwind of the Empire, more storms would take. Unfortunately, the increased rainfall, likely turn to snow, could probably hurt nearby nations we know. With this information, would it be wrong to propose that the snowfall that buried the Yaks was in part caused by the crystal tones? Of course, other effects of the urban heat isle don't apply. Crystal ponies in the Empire don't have the tech to pollute the water and sky. And some effects of the isle are positive still. It lengthens the growing season, so more crops could be tilled. Of course, this only helps the ponies inside. Beyond the Crystal Heart's barrier, crops will still likely die. But take heart, actual heart, not one made of stone, for I'm not here to denigrate the crystal ponies in their home. Through their ingenuity, they managed to survive, in an environment too extreme for most ponies to stay alive. Far from succumbing to pressures without, they managed to shine with their joy harnessed to keep the cold out. Even if a few animals may have been displaced, I believe something greater may have been put in their place. The climate effects require more years of study to define, and if they are true, the Empire can respond in kind. Water ponies could be dispatched to handle the threat, or the heart itself could be edited to protect not just ponies, but yaks and wildlife as well. Changes in climate need not be death knells, assuming if any of these threats exist. This is my speculation, so none may persist. Perhaps my paranoid mind has once again been caught. Presenting another Demented thought.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne.